We are building the bit by bit project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Uh, this entire project is about bitwise operators, and we have been looking at bitwise operators in quite a lot of detail, starting from the very, very basics of binary numbers, getting into, let's say, basic OR and XOR, building on to, say, bitwise and OR and XOR, looking at left shift and right shift, and also doing a bunch of compare and contrast to see how these operators are, let's say, different and how they are similar, how they are equivalent to some other things that we have done. We then took a slight detour where we applied these ideas into a visual, let's say, setup. We saw how these ideas, can be used to, let's say, manipulate an image, and how, image changes as we apply these operators. So that's quite interesting, I thought. But now it's time for us to get started with the actual activity, which is about controlling LEDs. Now, LEDs is stands for light emitting diodes. In fact, these have become so popular that from being just say let's say exotic stuff, now almost all lighting, even in our homes, is based on LEDs. So LEDs have become really, really popular, really beautiful as well. The whole idea is that, let's say we have a system where we have, say, 8 LEDs to control, and I have one port for each of these. Now, this could happen, for example, in when you're building a project using, let's say, a microcontroller which has got 8, let's say, outputs, and you can individually control each of these. So, for example, if I want to turn on, let's say, this as shown here, the 4 LEDs here, I go and turn on that port, may see, like, apply a high voltage there perhaps. So that becomes a 1, and these LEDs light up, others are all off. Now, the interesting bit here is that in this setup, it is just so much more natural to think in terms of bits. For example, even right now, really we do not need to worry about what does, let's say, 01010110 mean in decimal. In fact, all we care is that, okay, look, this bit is 1, and hence this LED is on. So, it's just so much more natural to think in terms of bits. And that's why bitwise operators become extremely appealing over here. We will see how handy they are to, let's say, build something like this. So what we are going to do in this activity is that we will build a simple emulation of this situation using Python Turtle. Now you might wonder how realistic all this is. Well, let's just take a step at that. Let's just think about it. Basically, LEDs are all over. We see them in festivals. We see them in, let's say, festivals like Diwali, Christmas. Um, we decorate our homes with these. If you go to markets, you'll see LEDs all over the place. People using them for different purposes. Um, it must be added that controlling LEDs at a large scale is definitely a lot more involved than our setup, right? Because there are at least two reasons. One is that in a setup like large lights, like I've shown here, one has to worry about many more things. For instance, let's say currents, voltages, heat, and so on and so forth. And number two, most of the time, we do not have individual control to every LED. So there are more smarter tricks that are applied, but the net effect is actually the same. So, one port might control, let's say, many, many LEDs, but it will look like they are all being individually controlled. So from that point of view, this activity is actually quite realistic because, we are saying that, look, we need to individually control this every LED, and hence logically every LED is going either 0 or 1. Yes, the exact mechanism of that gets much more involved in, let's say, real setups, but that's beyond our scope. For our case, I think this is actually quite realistic. So what are we going to do? Well, like I said, we will emulate this whole situation in Python Turtle, much like we've done for pixel art. We will create 8 squares to represent the 8 LEDs. 8-bit numbers can take on values between 0 and 255. We know that very well. We will determine which LED is on, which LED is off, depending on an 8-bit number, the binary representation of this. And we will basically, let's say, use bitwise operators to create patterns in these LEDs. And like I said, thinking at a bit level is so much more natural in this project than to think of, let's say, as the 8-bit number as a whole. So, that's our setup. Like I said, basically we are going to create in Turtle interface like this. I just write B0 to B7. So that stands for the lowest significant bit. Let's say the lowest bit on this, this pattern. And let's say the 7th bit, the most significant bit. Depending on which, so I then I specify a pattern. Depending on where we have ones, we just set those LED squares to red. so that they become, let's say, like they are on, right? Obviously, red is just a color. You can do many more things here, but I just imply red is on. So for instance, here, if the pattern was 3, I'm going to make it 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, because that's the binary representation of 3. If the pattern is, for example, 82, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. So notice that's what I'm doing, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0. So very interesting from that point of view. It's giving a visual dimension once again to these binary numbers by applying them here. The steps we'll follow, and this is important to understand so that we know where we are going. We will create a base program to create a, let's say, single pixel. Basically, let's say same as pixel art. So it's exactly like just write a square and then do a pixel art where we create, let's say, a single pixel. In fact, I must add that we must put them in a single row with these markings. So we'll just create, like, let's say, as though all LEDs are off, but these markings are put in, so that helps. Now, of course, I'm just putting them in a single row, but you can put them in more complicated manners. You can probably try to put them in a circle and so on. So that's my base program. Next, I will write the code using bitwise operators. Like I said, that's the more natural choice here, to figure out which LEDs must be turned on, and I will make them red. So basically, we'll specify a pattern in, let's say, 0 to 255, and that pattern will be then sort of visually seen on the LEDs. Next, we'll move on to do some dynamic patterns, much like our decorative festival lights. Again, we will use more bitwise operators, and you will just get a better feel for what does it mean to right shift, left shift, and why it is also natural and intuitive way to look at the whole problem than to think, let's say, in terms of numbers. And that's the whole point. Building an activity of this sort will solidify our understanding of whatever we have been doing. At YByte, we always make concepts come alive by applying them to interesting activities like we are doing here. Look at our website www.ybyte.in. You will see many, many, many such activities through which we learn Python programming. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.